Have you ever poured your entire soul into someone else's dream only to be treated like a ghost in your own life? For 10 years, Diana Stone was the silent architect behind her husband's empire, the invisible hand that polished his crown. But at a lavish party in her own home in front of the city's elite, he didn't just ignore her. He humiliated her, shattering her world with a single cruel laugh. He thought she was a decorative object he could discard at will. He was wrong. What happens when the woman everyone dismissed walks away, vanishes completely, and then returns to the one place she was never wanted, not in tears, but in a Rolls-Royce ready to claim everything she is owed? This is the story of how a silenced wife found her voice and built an empire on the ashes of a life she was forced to burn down. The clinking of crystal glasses was the only music Diana Stone could hear over the roaring silence in her own heart. She stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse apartment, a ghost in her own home watching the diamond-like lights of the city sprawl below. The view was worth millions, a testament to the success of her husband, the real estate magnate Jace Bennett. To the outside world, she was the enviable Mrs. Bennett, a woman draped in couture hosting parties for the city's most powerful people. But inside, she was a curator of a museum no one visited, a meticulously managed space where her own identity had been carefully packed away and stored in the attic of her marriage. For 10 years, Diana had been Jace's secret weapon. She wasn't just the wife who organized his life down to the last color-coded file. She was the strategist who vetted his deals, the wordsmith who ghost-wrote his powerful speeches, and the social diplomat who smoothed the egos of his difficult clients. She had a keen eye for potential and almost intuitive understanding of a property's soul, a skill she'd inherited from her grandfather, a master carpenter. Jace, however, called it her quaint little hobby. He reaped the benefits of her insights while publicly dismissing them, framing her as a woman with good, but ultimately domestic taste. Tonight was no different. Their apartment was filled with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of influential conversations. Jace was holding court in the center of the room, his voice a confident baritone that commanded attention. On his arm, shimmering like a venomous jewel, was Isabella Monroe. Isabella was Jace's latest protégé, a young, ravenously ambitious woman with a marketing degree and a portfolio of Instagram followers. Jace claimed he was mentoring her. The city's gossip columns and Diana's own aching intuition suggested the relationship was far less professional. Diana watched them, a perfect smile fixed on her face, a mask she had perfected over years of practice. Jace was laughing, a loud, performative sound, while Isabella gazed up at him with an expression of pure adoration that was as fake as the diamonds on her borrowed necklace. The key to the Meridian Tower deal was audacity, Jace boomed, gesturing with his champagne flute. The board was hesitant. They saw a historical liability. I saw a billion-dollar landmark. You have to have the vision to see past the dust and decay. Diana's smile tightened. The Meridian Tower deal had been her idea. She had spent a month poring over archaic blueprints and zoning laws, finding a loophole that allowed for historical preservation tax credits to fund a majority of the renovation, making it an incredibly profitable venture. She had presented the entire strategy to Jace in his home office one night. He had listened with a distracted air, tapping his pen on his desk, only to present her plan as his own brilliant epiphany at the board meeting the next day. She moved through the party, the gracious hostess refilling a glass here, offering a warm smile there. But her every move felt detached, as if she were watching a film of her own life. She stopped to speak with Mr. Abernathy, a grizzled old-money investor with a sharp mind. "Diana, my dear," he said, his eyes kind. "Jace is on fire tonight. That Meridian Tower is the talk of the town." "He has a unique vision," Diana replied, the words tasting like ash. "And a wonderful partner in you, I'm sure," Abernathy added with a knowing wink. He was one of the few who seemed to see past the facade. Later, as a smaller group gathered in the lounge, the conversation turned to the new waterfront development project, a contentious plan that involved demolishing a row of 19th-century warehouses. "It's a gold mine," Jace declared. "We tear down those old brick piles, put up a state-of-the-art glass condominium complex. It'll be the most exclusive address in the city. Isabella chimed in, her voice silky. The past is lovely, but the future pays the bills. Those warehouses are an eyesore. Diana, who had been silent, felt a spark of defiance. She had walked through those warehouses. She knew their history, the strength of their iron beams, the beauty of their hand-laid brick. Actually, she began, her voice soft but clear, those warehouses have incredible structural integrity. Their foundations are granite deeply set. You wouldn't be tearing down an eyesore, you'd be destroying an irreplaceable asset. They could be converted into luxury lofts, a commercial space that preserves the city's character while being wildly profitable. The exposed brick, the high ceilings, it's what the market is craving right now. It's authentic. The room went quiet for a beat. Jace's face darkened. He looked at Diana as if she were a servant who had spoken out of turn. He let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound that cut her to the bone. My wife, he said, addressing the room with a condescending smirk. She gets these sentimental ideas. It's charming, isn't it? She loves old things. It's her little hobby. But darling, he turned his cold eyes on her. We leave the business to the people who understand it. He then placed a hand on Isabella's shoulder. Isabella here, she understands. She ran the numbers. A new build is a 40% higher return on investment. No sentiment, just facts. The humiliation washed over Diana in a scalding wave. It wasn't just that he had dismissed her. He had done it publicly, patronizingly, painting her as a naive child while elevating the woman he was sleeping with as the voice of reason. The others in the group shuffled uncomfortably, some offering her looks of pity, which was somehow even worse. Isabella preened under Jace's praise, giving Diana a triumphant, pitying smile. It's a sweet thought, Diana, really. But some of us have to live in the real world. Diana didn't say another word. She simply nodded, the perfect smile back on her face, and excused herself. She walked out onto the balcony, the cold night air a welcome shock to her burning cheeks. She looked down at the city lights, the glittering empire Jace had built. An empire she had helped draw the blueprints for. He hadn't just taken her ideas. He had taken her voice, her confidence, her very sense of self. And he had done it so gradually she hadn't even realized how much she had lost until this very moment. The sound of his cruel laughter echoed in her ears. He called her love for history and architecture a hobby. He called her insights sentimental. He had reduced her entire being to a charming but useless accessory. Standing there shivering in the cold, Diana Stone made a decision. The curator was closing the museum. The ghost was about to leave the house, and she would not be making a grand dramatic exit. Jace loved drama. He fed on it. She would give him the one thing he couldn't stand: silence. There were no slammed doors, no tearful accusations, no dramatic packing of suitcases in the dead of night. Diana's rebellion was not a storm. It was a shift in the tide, silent, powerful, and absolute. The day after the party, Jace left for a 3-day business trip to Chicago, kissing her cheek with the casual indifference of a man leaving a piece of furniture he expected to be in the exact same spot upon his return. He didn't notice the new, unnerving stillness in her eyes, or the way her smile no longer reached them. His absence was the window she needed. Her departure was a masterclass in precision and quiet dignity. She did not ransack the apartment or take trophies of her gilded captivity. Instead, she performed a surgical extraction of herself from the life of Jace Bennett. She started in the shared walk-in closet, a space larger than her first apartment. His side was a monument to his ego, rows of bespoke suits, shelves of gleaming Italian shoes, a watch vendor displaying a collection worth a small fortune. Her side, once a curated collection of Jace-approved elegance, was now a place to be dismantled. She packed only the things that were truly hers, a few simple dresses she'd owned before she met him, a worn copy of The Fountainhead from her college days, and a small velvet box containing her grandmother's jewelry. The designer gowns, the extravagant handbags, the diamond necklace he'd given her after closing the Meridian Tower deal, she left them all hanging in silent, glittering rows. They were not gifts. They were a uniform, and she was no longer on duty. Next, she went to the home office. With methodical calm, she logged onto her personal laptop and began erasing her digital life. She transferred the funds from her personal bank account, a modest sum she'd inherited from her grandmother, an amount Jace had once sneeringly called her rainy day pin money, to a new account at a different bank under her maiden name Stone. She systematically deleted years of files, the market research she'd compiled, the draft speeches she'd written, the contact lists she'd cultivated. She was erasing every trace of the unpaid, uncredited work she had done for Bennett Enterprises. The hardest part was the library. It was her sanctuary, filled with books on art history and architecture. She ran her fingers over the spines, each one a memory. This was the one place she felt like herself. She carefully selected a dozen of her most cherished volumes and packed them in a box. The rest she left. They belonged to the house, not to her. She moved through the penthouse like a phantom, her footsteps silent on the polished marble floors. She took no art from the walls, no sculptures from their pedestals. She wanted nothing that would remind her of a life spent in the shadow of a man who saw her as nothing more than a beautiful, well-managed asset. On the final morning, just hours before Jace was due to return, the apartment was pristine, as if she had never been there at all. The only evidence of her decade-long residency was packed into 2 unassuming suitcases and 3 cardboard boxes that now sat by the service elevator. She had arranged for a simple car service, not a taxi, that would be logged at the building's front entrance. Her last act was the most significant. She walked into their master bedroom, a vast, sterile space decorated in shades of gray and chrome. On his side of the king-size bed, on his perfectly fluffed pillow, she placed a single crisp white envelope. Inside was a note written in her elegant, steady script. It did not contain accusations or explanations. It contained only 8 words. "I have contributed enough. My work is done." She did not sign it with love, or even with her name. He would know who it was from. As she rode down the service elevator, she felt a profound sense of lightness, a feeling so foreign it was almost dizzying. There was fear, of course, a knot of uncertainty tightening in her stomach. She was 42 years old, with a decade-long gap in her official resume and very little money to her name. But for the first time in 10 years, the fear was her own. The future was a blank page, terrifying and thrilling, and she was the one holding the pen. When Jace Bennett returned that evening, he strode into the apartment, dropping his briefcase by the door and calling out, "Diana, I'm home." Silence answered him. He frowned, annoyed. He expected her to be there, ready with a drink, asking about his trip. He walked through the silent rooms, a sense of irritation growing. It was only when he entered the bedroom and saw the white envelope on his pillow that a sliver of unease pierced his arrogance. He read the note. Once, twice. He scoffed. Contributed enough. What did that even mean? He assumed it was some kind of dramatic menopausal tantrum. She was upset about the party. Fine. She'd gone to a spa hotel for a few days to pout. She'd be back by the end of the week, full of apologies, and he would be magnanimous in his forgiveness. He crumpled the note and tossed it in the bin. He showered, ordered dinner, and didn't give her another thought. Jace Bennett could not conceive of a world that did not revolve around him. He could not imagine that Diana Stone had not just left the room, she had left the entire building, and she had no intention of ever coming back. 6 months passed. Jace's annoyance morphed into a simmering rage. Diana had not come back. His calls went to a disconnected number. His emails bounced. His inquiries to her few old friends were met with polite, unyielding ignorance. She had, for all intents and purposes, vanished. He hired a private investigator who came back weeks later with a thin file and a shrug. She had taken a train out of the city and disappeared. Jace was humiliated. People were starting to talk. His perfectly managed life now had a glaring, inexplicable crack in it. He told everyone she was unwell and recuperating at a private facility, a lie that salved his ego but did little to quell the whispers. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in a city known for its historic architecture and quiet charm, Diana Stone was covered in a fine layer of plaster dust, and she had never felt more alive. She hadn't run to a spa. She had run toward the only thing that had ever been truly hers, her passion. Using her grandmother's pin money, she had rented a small apartment above a bakery and enrolled in an intensive course on architectural restoration and project management. The woman who had once managed a multi-million-dollar household now managed budgets for copper piping and reclaimed timber. Her days were long and grueling. She spent her mornings in classes and her afternoons on scaffolding, learning from artisans who could tell the age of a brick by its texture. She traded her designer heels for steel-toed boots and her silk blouses for dusty work shirts. She was not Mrs. Bennet the socialite. She was just Diana the apprentice, and she was voracious in her desire to learn. Her breakthrough came not from a grand opportunity, but from a quiet connection. She sought out a man named Arthur Chen, a brilliant but semi-retired architect who had been a dear friend of her grandfather. Arthur was a purist, a man who believed buildings had souls. He had been pushed out of the mainstream by developers like Jace Bennett, whom he considered architectural butchers. Diana found him in his cluttered, sun-drenched studio surrounded by hand-drawn blueprints and intricate models. She didn't introduce herself as Jace Bennett's estranged wife. She introduced herself as Diana Stone, Joseph Stone's granddaughter. Arthur's eyes, clouded with age, sharpened with recognition. Joe Stone's girl. He was a true artist with wood. I haven't seen you since you were a child. What brings you here? She laid out her story. Not the story of her failed marriage, but the story of her passion. She showed him her sketches, her notes on historical preservation, her analysis of the warehouses Jace had wanted to destroy. Arthur listened intently, his gaze moving from her detailed drawings to her determined face. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. Your grandfather would be proud. You have his eye. But the eye is not enough. This business is filled with sharks. They will eat you alive if you show any weakness. I'm not weak, Diana said, her voice steady. I'm just starting over. Arthur saw the steel beneath the plaster dust. He took her on not as an employee but as a mentee. He taught her the brutal realities of the business, how to negotiate with contractors, how to navigate the labyrinth of city permits, and how to spot the subtle signs of decay in a century-old structure. Her first project was one no one else wanted. It was a dilapidated Victorian brownstone in a neighborhood that was just beginning to gentrify. Its facade was crumbling, its windows were boarded up, and it had been abandoned for 20 years. To developers, it was a teardown. To Diana, it was a sleeping beauty. She poured everything she had into it, her remaining inheritance, her time, her soul. She lived on coffee and sandwiches, working alongside the small dedicated crew Arthur had helped her assemble. She didn't just manage the project. She was part of it. She learned to strip paint, refinish floors, and replaster ornate ceiling medallions. She discovered a hidden dumbwaiter behind a wall and restored it. She found original hardwood floors beneath 3 layers of linoleum and brought them back to a lustrous shine. She named her fledgling company Stone Restorations. It was more than a business. It was a declaration. The project took 8 grueling months. There were setbacks, a leaking roof, a termite infestation, a contractor who tried to cut corners. Each time Diana, with Arthur's quiet guidance, found a solution. She refused to compromise on quality, blending the home's historic character with seamless modern amenities. When it was finally finished, the brownstone was magnificent. It was not just renovated, it was reborn. It retained its soul, but it was ready for a new life. She held a small open house for local real estate agents and architects. The response was overwhelming. People who had driven past the wreck for years were stunned by the transformation. The story of the miracle on Elm Street began to spread. A photographer for a prestigious architectural magazine attended the open house and was captivated. 2 months later, Stone Restorations was the subject of a 4-page feature titled, "The Soul of a House: How Diana Stone is Reviving History." The article celebrated her meticulous attention to detail and her philosophy of architectural empathy. It never once mentioned Jace Bennett. Diana was no longer a ghost. She was an architect, a builder, a creator, and she was just getting started. A year and a half after she left, Jace Diana Stone was no longer just a name in a magazine. She was a force. Stone Restorations had become the most sought-after historical restoration firm in the region. Her reputation was built on 2 things. Jace Bennett had always lacked integrity and vision. Where he saw decaying liabilities, she saw irreplaceable assets. She had completed 3 more projects, each one a triumph that further cemented her name. Her big break came in the form of a cryptic email from a law firm representing a high-net-worth individual. The client, they explained, had purchased the legendary Blackwood Manor, a sprawling Gothic revival estate that had sat empty for 50 years, tangled in legal disputes. The client, who wished to remain anonymous, was an admirer of her work and wanted to commission her for a complete restoration. When Diana and Arthur drove up the winding, overgrown lane to Blackwood Manor for the first time, she gasped. The estate was in a state of beautiful decay, its stone towers covered in ivy, its windows like vacant eyes. It was a monumental challenge, the kind of project that could define a career. The anonymous client turned out to be Alistair Sterling, a reclusive tech billionaire known for his eccentricities and his deep pockets. He met Diana not in a boardroom, but in the manor's dusty, cavernous library. He was a surprisingly unassuming man in his late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Ms. Stone," he said, shaking her hand. "Your work on the Elm Street brownstone was remarkable. You don't just fix buildings, you listen to them." "They have a lot to say," Diana replied with a small smile. "Indeed." Sterling nodded. "This house has been shouting for help for a very long time. I want you to make it live again. Money is no object. The only condition is that its soul remains intact." This was the commission of a lifetime. The project would take years and an astronomical budget. It elevated Stone Restorations from a boutique firm to a major player. The news of the Blackwood Manor restoration made industry headlines. Back in his own city, Jace Bennett was not faring as well. His professional life had begun to mirror his personal one, a gleaming facade hiding a foundation riddled with cracks. Isabella's influence had proven disastrous. She had pushed him toward flashy, high-risk projects that were hemorrhaging money. Her vision was all surface-level glamour with no substance. Furthermore, his aggressive tactics had finally caught up with him. He was embroiled in a nasty, high-profile lawsuit with a group of investors who accused him of fraud. The stress was taking its toll. He was short-tempered, his confidence fraying at the edges. He had hired a series of bland, overly efficient housekeepers, but the penthouse felt empty, sterile. He missed the effortless way Diana had managed his world, the way things had just worked. He would never admit it, but he was struggling without her. The silent architect of his success was gone, and he was discovering he didn't know how to read the blueprints on his own. One evening he was flipping through an architectural journal in his office looking for inspiration for an edge, and then he saw it. A feature on the Blackwood Manor project. He read the article, a sneer on his face. This Stone Restorations was getting an absurd amount of fawning press for fixing up an old ruin. He glanced at the picture of the firm's founder, a confident-looking woman in a hard hat smiling on the steps of the manor. His eyes narrowed. The name on the caption was Diana Stone. He froze, the magazine slipping from his fingers. It couldn't be. The woman in the photo was different. Her hair was styled differently. There was a strength in her posture he'd never seen before, a directness in her gaze. But it was her, there was no doubt. A tidal wave of emotions crashed over him. Shock, disbelief, and then a hot, possessive fury. His quiet, sentimental wife, the woman with the little hobby, was the celebrated head of a major architectural firm. It was impossible. It was an insult. He immediately began digging. He found the article about the brownstone, then others. He read the quotes praising her vision, her integrity. Every word of praise for her was a dagger in his own ego. She hadn't just left him. She had thrived. She had built a new life, a successful one, using the very skills he had mocked and dismissed. And then the final crushing blow. He remembered Blackwood Manor. Bennett Enterprises had been part of a bidding war for that property 2 years ago. His plan had been simple and brutal: acquire the estate, petition the Historical Society to have it delisted due to irreparable decay, and then demolish it to build a luxury golf resort and gated community. It would have been his crowning achievement. But he had been outbid at the last minute by an anonymous buyer, represented by a private equity firm. He had lost the deal. To her. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. His meek, docile wife had not only left him, she had outmaneuvered him, cost him a fortune, and was now being hailed as a visionary for saving the very landmark he had plotted to destroy. His humiliation was absolute. The Starlight Foundation Gala was the undisputed apex of the city's social calendar. It was an evening of performative philanthropy where the city's old money aristocrats and new money titans gathered to outbid each other on extravagant auction items and solidify their positions in the social hierarchy. For years, Jace Bennett had been a king at this event. He was a major benefactor of the foundation, and this year the Gala's committee had decided to honor him with the Visionary of the Year award for his contributions to the city's skyline. For Jace, the award was a desperately needed victory. With the lawsuit draining his resources and his reputation taking a hit, this public celebration was a chance to reassert his dominance. He envisioned the evening as his triumphant comeback, a night where he would stand on stage bathed in applause, with the beautiful Isabella on his arm, proving to the world that Jace Bennett was still on top. He had already commissioned a new tuxedo and instructed Isabella to purchase the most breathtaking gown she could find. This would be his night. 2 weeks before the event, an invitation arrived at the Stone Restoration's office. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock embossed with the Starlight Foundation's silver crest. Diana's assistant, a sharp young woman named Chloe, placed it on her desk. "This just came by courier. Looks important." Diana slit the envelope open. She read the invitation, her expression unreadable. It was not a generic corporate invitation. It was a personal one addressed to Ms. Diana Stone, inviting her to be seated at the head table as a special guest of the foundation's chairman. Her first instinct was to decline. The thought of being in the same room as Jace, of facing the world that had once pitied her, was nauseating. It felt like walking back into the cage she had fought so hard to escape. She was about to toss it in the bin when she saw a small handwritten note tucked inside, penned by Alistair Sterling himself. "Diana, I am now on the board of the Starlight Foundation. I believe it's time for the city's old visionaries to meet the new one. Your voice should be heard in that room. Consider it not an obligation but an opportunity. Your table awaits. A.S." Diana sat back in her chair, Sterling's note in her hand. An opportunity. He was right. This wasn't about the past. It wasn't about Jace or the life she had left behind. This was about the present. It was about Stone Restorations. It was about claiming her seat at the table not as Jace Bennett's wife, but as herself. Her work was changing the face of cities, and it deserved to be recognized in the very rooms where men like Jace made their destructive deals. A slow, determined fire ignited within her. She wouldn't go for revenge. Revenge was Jace's game, a petty, ego-driven pursuit. She would go for recognition. She would go to represent her work, her team, and her vision for a future that honored the past. Her preparation was not that of a woman preparing for battle, but of a queen preparing for her coronation. She contacted a couturier, not one of the flashy brands Jace preferred, but a designer known for her architectural, powerful silhouettes. Together they designed a gown. It was not the soft, pastel, submissive style she used to wear. It was a deep emerald green, the color of new life, crafted from heavy silk, that draped like liquid metal. It was elegant, commanding, and utterly her own. Chloe watched the transformation with awe. The Diana she knew was a focused, brilliant, and kind boss who was more comfortable in work boots than heels. Now she was watching a titan emerge. "Are you nervous?" Chloe asked gently a few days before the gala. Diana stood in front of a full-length mirror, the finished gown shimmering under the lights. She looked at her reflection, at the woman with the confident eyes and the faint smile who looked back at her. She thought of the woman who had stood on a penthouse balcony shivering and broken. They were the same person, yet they were worlds apart. "No," Diana said, her voice calm and clear. "I'm not nervous. I'm ready." She was not returning to her old life. She was stepping onto a stage she had earned the right to occupy, and this time she wouldn't be standing in the wings. She would be in the spotlight. The night of the Starlight Foundation Gala arrived on a wave of crisp autumn air, a perfect crystalline evening for the city's elite to display their plumage. A cavalcade of black cars, sleek as obsidian river stones, lined the approach to the grand concert hall. They deposited their passengers onto a plush red carpet that ran like a river of blood towards the magnificent columned entrance, a path flanked by a gauntlet of flashing cameras and the cacophony of reporters shouting names into the night. Jace Bennett's black Bentley was among the first of the truly important arrivals. He had timed it perfectly, not so early as to seem eager, but not so late as to miss the peak of the press attention. He stepped out a study in arrogant perfection. His Tom Ford tuxedo was impeccably tailored, his smile a predatory slash of white in his tanned face. This was his arena. For months he had felt his power waning, the ground shifting beneath his feet. But here on the red carpet, under the adoring glare of the lights, he felt his old self re-emerging. This award this night was the corrective he so desperately needed. It was a public declaration that the rumors of his decline were greatly exaggerated. Isabella Monroe emerged after him, a confection of crimson sequins and borrowed diamonds, a perfect accessory designed to signal his continued virility and success. She clung to his arm, her smile as bright and hard as the gems around her neck. They paused for the photographers, a practiced tableau of power and beauty. "Mr. Bennett, a big night for you. How does it feel to be named Visionary of the Year?" a reporter from a prominent business journal shouted. Jace's smile widened. He turned, projecting an air of effortless command. "It's a tremendous honor," he said, his voice a smooth baritone that carried over the din. "It's always gratifying when your efforts to push this city boldly into the future are recognized." He was in his element, the king reclaiming his throne. He was savoring the moment, basking in the familiar warmth of public adoration, when a subtle shift occurred. It began as a low murmur at the far end of the carpet, a change in the rhythm of the camera flashes. The roar of the press began to subside, their attention drifting away from him. Heads started to turn, craning to see past the line of waiting cars. Jace felt a prickle of annoyance. Who would dare upstage him on his night? A different kind of vehicle was pulling up to the curb, a car that made the Bentleys and Maseratis seem common by comparison. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, a bespoke model in a stunning deep midnight blue that seemed to drink the light around it. It moved with a silent, regal grace, its engine purring with a sound so quiet it was almost a whisper. This wasn't a car leased for the evening. It radiated the solid, permanent air of true generational wealth. The crowd murmured, speculating. A reclusive tech billionaire. A foreign dignitary making an unannounced visit. A uniformed chauffeur. His movements crisp and economical, exited the driver's side. He walked with unhurried purpose to the rear passenger door and with a quiet click opened it. The world seemed to hold its breath. A single elegant heel in emerald green satin, adorned with a delicate diamond clasp, touched the red carpet. Then Diana Stone emerged. A collective audible gasp rippled through the onlookers, a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. For a half-second the press corps was stunned into utter silence. Then they erupted. The flashing strobes became a sustained, blinding lightning storm, a frantic frenzy of light and noise directed entirely at her. It's Diana Stone. Ms. Stone. Over here, just one shot. The founder of Stone Restoration's Unbelievable. She was a vision, a masterpiece of transformation. The emerald silk gown was not merely a dress. It was a statement. It clung to her form, its clean architectural lines accentuating a strength and posture that no one in this crowd had ever seen in her before. A simple but breathtaking diamond and emerald necklace, her grandmother's reborn by a master jeweler, graced her collarbone. Her hair was styled in an elegant, severe chignon that highlighted the fine bones of her face, and her makeup was understated, serving only to amplify the confident, brilliant light in her eyes. This was not the subdued, tastefully invisible Mrs. Bennet they remembered from the society pages. This was a woman who commanded space, who owned her power, as if she had been born to it. From his position on the carpet, Jace froze. His practiced smile dissolved, melting from his face to be replaced by a mask of pure slack-jawed shock. His brain stuttered, refusing to process the image before him. Diana here, arriving in a car that cost more than his first condominium, and looking like that. The sounds of the Gala faded to a dull roar in his ears. It was a physical blow, a complete system failure of his understanding of the world. He felt Isabella tense beside him, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the fabric of his suit jacket. "Jace, who is that?" She hissed, her voice a cocktail of confusion and venom. She didn't recognize her. In her mind, Jace Bennett's discarded wife was a mousy, irrelevant creature, not this goddess who had stolen the entire city's attention. Jace couldn't answer. He could only stare as Diana, seemingly serene and untroubled by the chaos she was causing, gave a slow, calm smile to the clamoring cameras. She didn't pause to posture or preen. She simply began to walk forward with a grace and purpose that was mesmerizing. Her path took her directly past the spot where Jace and Isabella stood frozen like statues. This was the moment he expected her to look, to offer a triumphant smirk or a glare of hatred. He braced for it, but it never came. She did not look at them. Her gaze was fixed ahead, her expression one of polite, calm focus on the entrance of the building. It was not an act of ignoring him. It was something far more profound, far more devastating. It was a complete and total lack of acknowledgement. She passed by as if he were a velvet rope stanchion, a piece of the scenery, an object so utterly irrelevant to her world that he didn't even register in her field of vision. Just as she reached the grand doors, the Gala's formidable chairperson, Beatrice Davenport, a woman who did not suffer fools or court newcomers, swept out to greet her personally. "Diana, my dear," Beatrice exclaimed, her voice booming with genuine warmth as she enveloped Diana in an embrace. "You look absolutely stunning. Alistair told me you'd be a vision, and he did not exaggerate. Come, our table is waiting." Beatrice looped her arm through Diana's, and together the two powerful women, the old guard and the new, swept into the Gala, leaving Jace Bennet standing on the red carpet. The press, their prize having moved indoors, began to disperse. The moment was over. He was forgotten, an afterthought at his own coronation, his Visionary of the Year award, suddenly feeling like a cheap plastic trinket. For the first time in his life, he was not the main event. He was merely a baffled spectator at the arrival of the woman he had so carelessly thrown away. The grand ballroom was a universe unto itself, a swirling galaxy of glittering chandeliers, old money, and new power. As Diana entered on the arm of Beatrice Davenport, a palpable shift occurred in the room's atmosphere. A wave of whispers followed her, not the salacious gossip she had once endured, but murmurs of awe and respect. She was not a ghost from Jace Bennett's past. She was a luminary in her own right, and the room recognized it instantly. She navigated the space with a quiet confidence that was more commanding than any loud declaration. People who had once offered her polite, pitying smiles now approached with genuine deference. A prominent banker who had coolly rejected her initial request for a business loan 2 years ago now rushed to her side, his voice dripping with admiration. "Ms. Stone, a triumph. The Blackwood Manor project is simply a triumph. Diana simply smiled a serene, knowing expression and thanked him before moving on. From across the room, Jace watched a glass of scotch clutched so tightly in his hand that his knuckles were white. Each smile directed at Diana, each handshake, each nod of respect was a personal affront. He felt his world tilting on its axis. Isabella, sensing her own social currency plummeting, was growing increasingly agitated beside him. "Why is everyone fawning over her?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "She's a nobody." Jace didn't answer. He was watching Diana speak with Mr. Abernathy, the kind old money investor from that fateful party. Abernathy wasn't fawning. He was listening with rapt attention, his weathered face alight with genuine interest as she spoke not of society nonsense but of the structural challenges of restoring 19th century cast iron facades. She was holding court not with gossip but with substance. She was everything he had told her she wasn't. The award ceremony was an exercise in pure agony for Jace. When his name was called for the Visionary of the Year award, the applause felt thin, obligatory. He walked to the stage, the heavy trophy feeling like a mockery in his hands. He delivered the speech he had labored over, a series of hollow platitudes about building the future and bold innovation. The words felt foreign in his own mouth. He looked out at the audience and saw them polite and impassive. But when he looked at the head table, he saw Diana, her expression unreadable, her presence a silent, damning judgment on his entire life. He couldn't stand it. He needed to confront her, to re-establish the old order, to force her back into the small, manageable box he had created for her. After the ceremony, he saw her slip out onto a secluded marble terrace that overlooked the foundation's meticulously sculpted gardens. This was his chance. He followed her out the cool night air, doing nothing to quell the fire of rage and confusion in his gut. "Diana," he said. His voice was a low, strained growl stripped of its usual charm. She turned slowly, her emerald gown catching the moonlight. There was no fear in her eyes, no surprise. It was as if she had been waiting for him. "Jace." He stalked toward her, stopping a few feet away, his frame tense with aggression. "What is all this?" he demanded, gesturing vaguely at the opulent party behind them, the Rolls-Royce at the curb, her entire impossible existence. The car, the dress cozying up to Alistair Sterling. "What kind of pathetic little game are you playing?" "It's not a game, Jace," she replied, her voice as calm and unyielding as the stone balustrade she leaned against. "It's my life." His old condescension flared, a familiar weapon for his wounded ego. "Don't be naive," he scoffed. "You stumbled into some inheritance, got lucky with one sentimental project. This world," he sneered, "will chew you up and spit you out. You're in over your head. You don't know what you're doing." He took a breath, deliberately softening his tone, trying to slip back into the role of the magnanimous husband. "Look," he said, forcing a placating note into his voice. "I'll admit I was harsh. Things were said. But this melodrama has gone on long enough. It's time to come home. We can put all of this nonsense behind us. I'm willing to forgive you." The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of the statement hung in the air between them. Forgive her. Diana felt a laugh, a real genuine one, bubble up inside her, but she suppressed it. A laugh would be a release, and she would not give him that satisfaction. "There is no home to come back to, Jace," she said, her voice dropping, losing its social grace and gaining a core of forged steel. "You burned it to the ground. You seem to be under the impression that I left because of a single party, a single insult. You've misunderstood completely." She took a step toward him, closing the distance, and for the first time he felt a flicker of intimidation. "You didn't just ignore me," she continued, her voice a devastatingly quiet indictment. "You actively, systematically tried to erase me. You took my work, my research, my insights, the very soul I poured into your business, and you presented them as your own. You didn't just dismiss my passion, you belittled it. You called it a hobby." She let the word hang in the air, a poisoned dart. "Well, Jace, my hobby is now the creative force behind the most significant historical restoration project this state has seen in 50 years. He recoiled as if she had struck him. "Blackwood Manor." He breathed the name, tasting like acid. You did that to spite me, to humiliate me. No, Diana corrected him, her gaze so direct and clear it felt as though she could see straight through him. I did that for the house, and for me. Spite is your currency, Jace, not mine. You see the world through the lens of your own ego, so you assume everyone else does too. You saw an estate to be gutted for a quick profit. I saw a masterpiece of architecture gasping for breath. That has always been the fundamental difference between us. You build monuments to yourself that will be obsolete in 20 years. I give buildings with the soul a new life that will last for 100 more. She saw the confusion and rage warring in his eyes and pressed her advantage. You want to talk about the real world? Let's talk about it. Your coveted waterfront condominium project. It's hopelessly stalled. The Historical Society has filed an injunction citing concerns about preserving the district's character. Those protests, Jace, were funded by a very generous anonymous grant from the Sterling Foundation. Jace's face went slack. And that nasty lawsuit with your investors. She went on, her voice relentlessly calm. It's going badly for you because they finally realized your profit projections were based on flimsy speculative data. Data provided by your protege, a marketing intern you put in charge of multi-million-dollar financial analysis. Your empire isn't just cracking, Jace. It's failing, because the architect who designed its foundation is no longer there to patch over your incompetence and hold it all up. Each word was a surgical strike, dismantling the facade of the great Jace Bennett piece by piece. He was pale, speechless, trapped in the horrifying clarity of her words. And then there's Blackwood Manor, she said, delivering the final crushing blow. Your brilliant plan was to have it delisted and demolished. But my restoration, personally funded by Alistair Sterling, has resulted in the manor and its surrounding lands being granted the highest level of National Historic Landmark protection. It can never be torn down. The land is now a permanent conservation trust. Your golf resort is dead. It will never exist. You didn't just lose a bid, Jace. You lost the entire war, and you were too arrogant to even realize you were fighting it. It was at that precise moment, as Jace stood there utterly broken, that a voice from inside the ballroom, amplified by the microphone, drifted out onto the terrace. It was Beatrice Davenport back on the stage. And now, ladies and gentlemen, her voice rang out, I have one final exciting announcement to make. As you know, the city is embarking on its most ambitious urban renewal project to date, the complete revitalization of the historic warehouse district. Jace's head snapped up. His last hope. The one project he was counting on to save his company. After a long and meticulous review process, Beatrice continued, her voice swelling with pride, the Starlight Foundation and the City Council have chosen the firm that has demonstrated an unparalleled vision of blending history with progress, a firm with unimpeachable integrity. It is my absolute honor to announce that the future of our city's historic heart will be shaped by the brilliant mind behind Stone Restorations. A roar of thunderous, genuine applause erupted from the ballroom. The sound washed over Jace, a deafening wave of his own failure. He was forced to listen to them cheer for her for the very project idea he had so cruelly mocked in his own home. Diana gave him one last look. There was no pity in it, no triumph, only a profound and final sense of closure. My work here is done, she said, echoing the 8 words she had left on his pillow all that time ago. She turned her emerald gown swirling around her and walked away from him. She didn't look back. She stepped out of the shadows of the terrace and back into the brilliant light of the ballroom, into the sound of her own name being celebrated, leaving Jace Bennett utterly alone in the darkness, a forgotten visionary standing in the ruins of an empire he finally understood he had never built alone. In the end, this isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about reclamation. Diana Stone didn't seek to destroy the man who broke her. She sought to build the woman he never allowed her to be. Her greatest victory wasn't seeing him fall. It was realizing she had the strength to rise on her own. It's a powerful reminder that our worth is never determined by those who refuse to see it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is walk away in silence and let our success become the loudest noise in the room. Her story proves that the person you are destined to become is so much more powerful than the person someone else tried to make you. If Diana's journey from a silenced wife to a celebrated visionary resonated with you, please take a moment to support our channel. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who might need to hear it, and make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on so you don't miss our next story of transformation and empowerment. And we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What was the moment you knew Diana had truly won?